Welcome to Transit Talk, a new monthly webinar series RVA Rapid Transit is putting on. We're very thankful to have you all here with us today. My name is Kendra Norrell, and I'm RVA Rapid Transit's board president. And as many of you know, RVA Rapid Transit is a nonprofit dedicated to educating and advocating for frequent and far-reaching public transit in the Richmond region. I'm also the community engagement coordinator for the City of Richmond's Office of Sustainability, and we're currently working on RVA Green 2050, which is the city's equity-centered climate action and resilience initiative, which connects directly to public transportation to help equitably reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the Richmond region. So our transit talk topic today is zero fare. As we know, GRTC has been running buses free of charge since last year, and part of the fight to fight the spread of COVID, and in part to provide immediate relief to core bus riders. We are very excited to have Julie Timm, GRTC CEO, as our guest today, who is going to share about the costs, benefits, and future possibilities for zero fare locally. Just to go over a couple of housekeeping things, we just want to note that we are recording this event and we'll have it up shortly on our website, rvarapidtransit.org, and YouTube channel for folks who couldn't be here today. To keep down background noise, please do keep yourself on mute during this event, but we will be taking questions and comments in the chat. We will have time for questions and answer based on those after the presentation today. After Q&A, we will also have a chance to hear from RVA Rapid Transit's new Director of Community Engagement, Faith Walker, about an initiative we have just gotten underway called The Rider's Voice. To start though, we are going to have a presentation from GRTC CEO Julie Timm on zero fare. Julie began at GRTC roughly a year and a half ago, sorry, wow, time is really going fast, in the fall of 2019. She came with over 20 years of experience in transit planning and leadership, most recently serving as the Chief Development Officer for Nashville's transit system. It has been wonderful having her driving forward public transit in the Richmond region, especially in these difficult times. Thank you again for being with us this afternoon, Julie. And if you are ready to share, if you are ready, you can share your screen and your presentation.
I am ready. I hope everyone can hear this okay. I can't help myself. Unfortunately, I do this, and people who know me will laugh. I'm watching people enter the waiting room, and so I've been admitting them for you because you've been talking. So I just took charge and started admitting people from the waiting room.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I really am happy to be here today. Let me make sure I'm on the right slide before I start sharing. Here we go. This one and share. A year of working on these presentations, and I'm still not great at it. Quick question, can you see the slide? That got a thumbs up, and did you see it change?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So the question about fares, whether or not we should charge, why we're not charging, whether or not this should be an ongoing question, has gained momentum in this region, not just here actually in this region, but across the country, as COVID has caused us to really reconsider how we keep our buses safe, to put the zero fares in place, to allow for backdoor boarding so our passengers and our operators have some distance. And it was put in place a year ago in March. But honestly, it's a conversation we've been having here with some of the local officials for more than just the past year. It's elevated the seriousness of these conversations because of COVID, and some of the underlying reasons why we should continue the conversation also have been elevated because of COVID. But honestly, it was a question pre-COVID. So I think it's important to give you a little bit of context about who GRTC is, what we do, our funding, so that as we start talking about the costs and benefits and trade-offs with zero fare, you have a little bit of a foundation that we can all lean on to talk about those trade-offs. Okay, so RVA Public Mass Transit, GRTC. GRTC, Greater Richmond Transit Company. We are the provider of public mass transit for the RVA region. Region has about 1.3 million people. Most of our service is in Richmond and Henrico, with some in Chesterfield. Our population is around 400,000 or 500,000 of people who have direct access to transit or paratransit services. The services we provide are local bus, commuter bus, bus rapid transit, paratransit service. Paratransit is for that ADA accessible service. When we did launch, and I say we because I've embraced GRTC in this region as my new home, but this actually happened before I got here. So when we launched BRT and the system redesign in 2018, that resulted in double-digit ridership increases in our transit growth. And that actually is very surprising in a lot of ways, because across the country, ridership in transit was dropping by double digits. Gas prices were going down, transit ridership was going down, and in the face of this, as GRTC and the Richmond area reinvented our transit, we were seeing double-digit growth. Looking forward and building on that success with new regional funding and with the partnerships we're forming with our local jurisdictions, we're looking to expand that service in 2022, which could begin as early as FY 2022 actually begins in June of 2021. We have a mid-cycle fiscal year. So with the new dedicated funding that we're getting from the CBTA and with the support of our partners, we're looking to advance expansion of service, both in area and in frequency, and we're in that planning phase now. Now our money, because when we're talking about zero fares, we can't have a conversation about zero fares without understanding what our monetary needs are, how much money we're getting in and how much money we're putting out and where that's going. Pre-COVID, and I think you can see my mouse here. I have to look at my other screen to see where my mouse is. So excuse me if I look to the side. Pre-COVID, we were adopting a budget for the fiscal year we're in right now that was about $56 million. And of that, $7 million was associated with fares. When COVID hit at the end of FY 21, fares immediately went away. We were so blessed to be supported by the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. They immediately gave us relief funds that allowed us to go zero fare for the protection of our staff and the protection of our riders, and the ongoing federal stimulus money that's allowed us to stay zero fare throughout this fiscal year. Well, that money, that $7 million went away very quickly. Also, as the regional economy was impacted by COVID, and with the launch of the CBTA, there was a reduction in the allocations from our local partners. So you can see the $10 million, so that's the $16 million from Richmond, the nearly $9 million from Enrico. Those, when you come over, you can see that there's a quick cut of those back to about 50%. Now, part of that was because we were in a position where we were relooking at how we would allocate our revenues with the CBTA, the Central Virginia Transportation Authority dedicated funding. But part of that also was because they were also reacting to COVID. So it was a kind of a double hit with the reduction of the local resources, with the reduction of the fares. We were able to use the CARES Act funding that came out in March of 2020. That's the black hole that was created, this $26.1 million black hole was filled with the CARES Act money. CARES Act money, we received $32 million. So some of that was spent in 2020. Some of it filled our budget gap in 2021, and a small amount is for reserve that's left over for unexpected needs, about $3 million. So the $26 million is fully taken care of to support transit, support our riders, to protect our local economy and our local partners. But it also, you'll see, going from 56 million to 60 million under COVID, we also had to increase our expenses. Those increased expenses of $4 million came from the need for PPEs, the need for masks, the hand sanitizer, the disinfecting of our fleet. We went from disinfecting and cleaning our fleet once every 4 days to every single night, sometimes multiple times. The sick pay for when people did get sick, or more than that, when they had to be quarantined. Even if they weren't sick, we had a lot of quarantine sick pay out there to protect our staff from developing clusters or surges internally. That's a lot of money that went into our service, and a lot of that is money that we need to maintain in perpetuity. We should never go back to cleaning our buses once every 4 days. So it was a reset of our budget. Now, when we look forward to next year, we're looking at an increase from a $60 million budget to about a $64 million budget. That's an increase of about 4 or 5%. which is a pretty standard increase for transit across the industry, between healthcare costs, salary increases from the union staff around 3%, liability costs, gas premiums. That's a pretty standard increase. The black hole is gone and the fares are back. So starting of July 1st, 2021, with the new fiscal year, here's my mouse, you can see that $6.8 million is back, down from what we expected because of course we still are under the COVID impacts, COVID ridership. We would expect to have about that much revenue coming back, equivalent to where we were 2 years ago. And then you see this 20 million is this blue. That's the expectation of where the CVT, the regional money that's coming in, would fill in to support transit service with the reduction of allocations from our local partners and the increased demand for the cleanliness and support of our service that we experienced because of the COVID changes. That's not all of the CVTA money. That's just a portion of it that would support our existing service. There's also a portion that's set aside that we're looking to use for service expansion, service frequency increases. That's the study that's going on right now. How do we use the rest of the CVTA money to improve our frequencies and coverage? So there is more money set aside for that. But you'll notice that because this 6.8 is sitting there, none of the CVTA money is being expected to cover fares. Fares go back. The question is that as we move forward, and we'll talk about this later, 6.8 is a big amount of money to fill if we go zero fares. Well, we're going to put a pin in that. We'll come back to it. So the first thing is, if we're going to fill that, where does the money go? How do we spend our money now? This is a kind of a spread of how we spend our money and where we've spent our money. Every now and then I hear people say, well, GRTC has money that they do all kinds of things. One point I heard people say that they have gold-plated service and they're top-heavy in their administration. Let me tell you, we're not. Neither of those. The majority of our funds go into operations. You can see this first set of columns year over year. As we increase service, we put more service out, more frequency out, we expand where we go, those costs go up. I see this one spike in this fiscal year. That's because of the CARES Act money and our ability to put out a little bit more service for paratransit. That's our budget number. When we get our actuals, it'll probably be lower. The rest of our money, a lot of it goes into the maintenance, keeping our buses in a state of good repair. This just makes sure that our oil's changed, our transmissions are changed, the body shop is making sure that there's no damage to the outside of the buses, and the benefits that go along with supporting our staff, the sick leave, the retirement, the health care, the life insurance, the benefits that are associated with operations and maintenance staff, and the insurance to make sure that we have the liability coverage. You'd be surprised how many people actually run into our buses. That drivers on the road, as they're not paying attention, will actually run into our buses. You would think they would see us, but some reason they don't. I'll let you come to your own conclusions on that one. But the rest of it shows that when you look at the actual administration, we don't put a lot of money into management. So when we look to cut money and become more effective, there isn't much to cut other than operations, and that's off the table. So really we're in a situation where in order to fill that 6.8 hole, if we were to take fares away, there's not a lot of efficiencies that could reduce that amount of money. Okay, so who are we? Who do we serve? This is also a very relevant conversation when we talk about zero fares. Who really is riding our service? Well, pre-COVID, when we look at our market, we were originally providing, we were projecting to get about 10 million trips, and the majority of those were really focused on getting people from home to work and back again, with some rides to shopping, to college, to medical, to other needs, to food, to social. But the vast majority of our ridership and our market share is focused on going from home to work and back again. And the majority of those riders and the majority of those housing and jobs are within just a few blocks of where our lines are. That's who we serve. Now, this next slide is a little bit, I'm going to use my mouse a lot for this one because it further defines who's riding what. When we talk about our market, what are they riding? I said when we started this, we had the BRT service, the local service, the express service, and the paratransit. Well, really focusing on those core BRT, local, and express. Express is not a major market for us. You can see this, my mouse lost. Pre-COVID, that blue line here, that was how much of our market was express service. Next to it, you can see that the BRT, that's growing. BRT's only been there for 2 years. So having that amount of ridership after 2 years is awesome. The next one is local. Clearly, the majority of our service is based on local service, local ridership. The next of these is who actually rides those services. When you look at the express, the majority of those riders are people who make over $100,000, over $75,000 a year. They are people who are predominantly white, and they are predominantly not paying for transit, honestly. Predominantly, they have e-passes or U-passes or business passes. Their businesses that they work for are paying their service. So we're getting that money, but we're not getting it from their pocketbooks. We're getting it from the businesses that support them. BRT, again, when you look at BRT, a lot of riders, it's pretty much similar to proportionally to our local routes. So BRT really is a good reflection of our local routes. But when you come over to our local routes by race and by income, the majority of our riders make below 10,000, below 25,000, below 50,000 a year, annual household, not individual, household income. The majority of our riders are making very low income. They're predominantly people of color, and they're predominantly buying transit passes, paying for fares with one ride, cash, and 1 day passes. The most expensive passes you could buy because of you don't get the benefit of that 30-day discount. That's what's being hit. Now, when COVID hit, all those people who weren't paying anyway, the express, they disappeared. They got to telework. For BRT, anyone who was a student and anyone who was faculty and staff at VCU, any state workers, they could shut down and telecommute. We lost them. But local bus riders and the rest of BRT, they stayed with us throughout COVID. High levels of ridership on our local service and our BRT. And the next question is, okay, so they're not able to telework. That tells us that we are serving a market of essential workers, essential workforce that can't stay home. They have to use our service. We also started getting reports that the majority of our riders of our local lines still had a high level of ridership per bus. So I asked the team, can you map it out? And this is what they showed. Those red lines, those are our routes that during the peak of COVID and the duration throughout had ridership on a bus of 30 people or more. Now this is when we're supposed to be having social distancing of 10 people on a bus. And yet our essential workforce is not able to social distance on the buses because they have to get to work and they have to get home. They don't have a way to telework. When you look at that map compared to our economically distressed areas for the region, it reconfirms that. These are workers who are coming from areas that are economically depressed. They have essential jobs, they have low income jobs, and the transit service that stayed in place throughout COVID is service that they were relying on so that they could put food on their tables and pay their rent and keep our economy going. So it really showed the essential nature of our service. And going zero fares, while the first purpose of going zero fares was absolutely to protect our operators. We can't operate if our operators sick, and we had to create a separation between the riders and the operators. But the second reason to go zero fare really shows itself here. It's necessary for the people who ride it to be able to get to and from work because they're the people who are most economically hurt by COVID. They have the least reserves in their bank account, and they're the most likely to use the $1.50 cash, and the most likely to not have that this past year. So we really have this case for how do we, for keeping zero fares there, at least through COVID, and at least through the economic recovery post-COVID. So we have a very strong case for staying zero fares for that duration because of who our market is, because of who we serve, because of what we learn. Now the question becomes, can we stay zero fares longer than that? How much do we get from fares? Where does it come from? The next slide starts to talk about that cost, the cost of collecting fares and where that $6.8 million we keep talking about. I put that back up here so you can see the 6.8. You can see the CVTA money and the local monies, but that 6.8, somehow if we stay zero fares, when the federal money goes away, something's gonna have to fill that, right? Well, the first thing to know is that we don't need it to fill $6.8 million. We only need to fill about 5.3 million, because this first chart here shows that for our budget next year, about $1.5 million of our budget is needed just to collect fares. So if we don't collect fares, we don't have that expense. So really we don't need 6.8, we need 5.3 million. Now we can, with the money that we have available from the feds, we can certainly cover that. But long-term, when we think about who normally pays that 5.3, if we put fares back, let's say we get through this year and we say January 1, 2022, we're going to put fares back. We're going to collect 5.3. It's important to collect that money. Who really is paying it? And that's when you go over to this next graph of saying, okay, when we're collecting fares, we're collecting the 7.4. It's not, I know it's not 6 point, that 7.4 includes the VCU money because that goes back from 2019 or from FY19. The majority of the money we're collecting is on local buses, $5.2 million on local, 4.4 from Richmond alone, 8.8 from Enrico. So we're spending $1.7 million so that we can collect $5.2 million from our most poor, most disadvantaged, most depressed areas, communities, and populations. Some folks will say, well, we want to make sure that we keep the fares in place so that we can collect fares from the express riders. Well, we already know that they're not paying anyway, and what they are paying comes from their businesses. It's only about $500,000. Some folks will say, well, we want to make sure that each jurisdiction is paying its fair share. Well, most of the money is coming out of Richmond. It's coming from Richmond riders. It's coming from those disadvantaged areas in Richmond. So it starts kind of, again, making this case of the 5.3 that we need is right now on the backs of the poorest in the city of Richmond. Okay, still doesn't answer the question. If we do this, there's obviously a case to go forward with zero fares. There's an economic and a social case that if you can take that burden off of the disenfranchised communities, they could help. Oh yeah, thank you. So there is that case for it. The question is, okay, but you still have a hole. Who is going to pay it if they're not paying it? Okay. Excellent question. So the $5.3 million investment, show me the money. Right now, DRPT, Department of Rail and Public Transportation, they have in their budget with the state $10 million for zero fare pilots. It could be used for multiple years. It's not dedicated to GRTC, but we would certainly be able to use that to offset the costs for several years. We would apply for that. We have federal stimulus money. The CARES Act money was just round one of stimulus money. There's a third round of stimulus relief money that was just passed today. It's expected that President Biden will sign it tomorrow. That is going to send, I believe, I don't recall the exact amount for the city of Richmond and for the region, but it's well over $100 million for the region. And it's a significant amount as well for GRTC. So there is money coming from the third round of stimulus that will come to this region that we could use for a variety of reasons. One of those could be zero fares, and it could get us into zero fares and to hold that for not just 1 year, but for several years while we pilot and see how it works. We also have other sources of funding we can look at. We're looking at doing some more advertising, so some self-generated revenue on advertising on our buses. How could we ramp that up to be able to increase it? How could we talk to our local partners about slowly increasing their contributions to transit and their investment in transit over several years to help kind of bridge that gap as the federal and state money declines? So there are places there that we're looking at that would allow us to slowly over multiple years wean ourselves off of the relief money and slowly increase our investment locally that would then be reinvested by our impoverished communities into their own well-being. Okay, so that leads us, the last few slides are text heavy, but I want to acknowledge that this is the conversation, and it's a hard conversation, to fair or not to fair. And so I have 2 slides for the case against and 2 slides for the case for zero fares. Against zero fare, the first one that always comes up is, why would we put this money into zero fares? Wouldn't people be better served by higher frequency and broader coverage? And the answer is, they would be well served by that. Would they be better served? That's questionable. I think that we absolutely need it. We need that higher frequency. The truth is that the CVTA money is giving us that now. We're already studying how to put that higher frequency in and that higher coverage in. And it's going to be about $7 to $10 million coming over the next year to put that frequency in. If you doubled or tripled it, it wouldn't come any faster, because we still have to buy the buses, hire and train the operators. So we have to get the plan in place. We have to put the frequency out, see how it works. More money to us for frequency is not going to mean we're going to be able to put more frequency out sooner. The zero fares will have an immediate and ongoing lasting impact for our communities. Another question is the budget hole. What happens when the relief funding dries up? Great conversation. I think I just addressed that one. There's also the conversation about, we need an emphasis on collecting fares from our white collar telework commuters. I think I addressed that one already by saying they're not paying, mostly, not all. A lot of them aren't paying anyway. They're being paid because of their worker benefits. And many of them might not ever come back to transit anyway. They could go to van. And putting $1.5, $1.7 million into a fare system simply so we can collect $500,000 from them does not make economic sense. Now, there's the idea of localism versus regionalism, who pays and who benefits. And this I want to make sure I hit very hard, because this is a good conversation. There's concern that we would use CVTA money or other money from the region to benefit zero fares, which, we have a fairly small footprint. And that I want to be very, very clear that the CVTA money and that regional money is meant for regional transit and expansion and frequency of regional transit. That money would not go into zero fare. It has to go into improved service. And that's the commitment that was made when the law passed, our commitment to our partners, and it is not touchable for zero fares. We also hear the arguments a lot of that if you keep zero fares out, you're going to increase your ridership to the point where it's standing room only. So you should keep fares in place to reduce your ridership. Yes, just like congestion pricing, putting fares in place does depress ridership. I would prefer to say that as we have this CVTA money to put more frequency out and to put more service out, we'll have some of the buses that will help to alleviate that demand. But if we have a demand for more transit, I don't think the answer is to put fares out to reduce the ridership. I think the answer is to find additional funding sources and commitment to increase service to meet that demand. And the other question is, of course, always higher demand and cost for paratransit services. I think that we showed through the service we have now that the majority of our paratransit service riders who want to a lot of them like to and want to use our fixed route service, and they do. A higher demand, I expected that when COVID hit, we would have a higher demand for paratransit services. We budgeted for more money for paratransit services, and that just didn't happen. They stayed home rather than go out on paratransit. Other cases is that subsidies, we would leave money on the table that we could pay for low income fares. We could do fare capping. People could go and register for free rides. That increases our costs, increases the barriers to low riders to be able to get that. The idea that everyone should pay, that free service is undervalued. We also get a lot of conversations among our own staff about it increases the homeless on our buses. And it's true, it does. But again, using fares to keep them off doesn't work. They still can get their free cars and they still on. The answer to homelessness isn't fares. The answer to homelessness are programs, regional and local programs, to help find housing and jobs and resources for them. Now the cases for zero fare, again, I think I've made this point, but just to state it bluntly, fares are something of a regressive fee on our lowest income residents, and they do maintain barriers to access. Some folks like, well, if you take fares away, then people might use transit more to go more places more frequently. Yes. So instead of going to 2 job interviews, they can go to 5. Instead of going to work and from work, they could go to work and they go to the store to get their groceries and to the pharmacy to pick up medication and then home. They don't have that barrier anymore. We also know that because they are a very low income, if they're not putting that money into the fare box, it's going directly back into the local economy. They are using it to buy groceries, and they are using it to buy medication. They are using it to get education. So it's not money that leaves, it's immediately reinvested back into that local GDP. It also serves as a signal to the workforce that to stay here and to move here, that we invest in our people, that we invest in our transportation, and it signals to the business community to also come here. It creates a stronger local and regional economy. So you start seeing a regional growth, not just local, but regional support when you put zero fares in place. And my got 2 last slides on this. The last case for GRTC slide is that all the things we said, there's a business case for GRTC alone, that we have the higher ridership, we'll get higher federal and state funding because of that ridership. We operate more efficiently, that we don't have to stop and wait for fares to be collected, so we can run more effectively, reduce our headways without increasing costs. So again, that increases frequency just naturally, and it also decreases our administrative costs. The costs of collecting fare are very high, and as you start putting some of these account-based programs in place to try and carve out who's paying and how they're paying and how they subsidize, our costs just keep going up. You get more costs and less return. So again, another case for zero fare. All of those points are valid, both sides. I think I personally believe, professionally believe, there's a stronger case to go zero fare. However, it still requires a commitment from the region to say, yes, we all do agree with that, and that in 4 years from now, as we have less federal and outside subsidies, and as the economy grow, if GRTC is shown to support that through the zero fares, that after 3 or 4 years of piloting it, that the local economy would also be able to support maintaining that zero fares and continue to fill that gap and make us whole. So post-COVID opportunities, zero fares is absolutely up there, but there are other opportunities we need to talk about, and I hope to come back for later conversations to talk about our market opportunities, to talk with our partners, not just our national, state, and local, but also our advertising and our business partnerships about how they can invest in us, not just through fares, but through service opportunities, and to have the conversation that not all transit is designed for all people, that we definitely have markets, and we need to focus on our resources on the markets that that define who we are. For us right now, it's not a commute shed market like you might see in other legacy systems. It is definitely a local market, and we need to adjust our business model to really focus on that and grow it so that it supports good ridership, it supports good frequency, and it supports the prosperity and the growth of the people that we serve. And certainly as we get out of COVID, we don't expect service levels to return for everything. I think we'll see some express services that might translate over to van pools, and we might see some local services that see increased frequencies. So we'll have a lot of conversations post-COVID about how we consider transit, how we invest in transit, and how that investment in transit lifts up our entire region, not just our riders, but all of our economy for a stronger marketplace. And I think that is the end of the slide presentations I have. I'm going to unshare my screen.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Julie. It was really helpful, and it was a really helpful explanation of the issue, and so very detailed that some of the pre-questions that we made were 100% answered in that presentation. So I really appreciate that. So we do have some time now for questions from the audience, and As a reminder, you can put those in the chat section and we will go through them. There's already one in here. Does an increase in ridership that reflects a partial mode shift from driving lead to cost savings from a road maintenance standpoint? And is that something that you've considered using in your case, your argument?
Wow, I don't have that level of data. I was thinking, actually, I was interested. I was thinking about just this morning, what kind of mode shift would we want to be able to see some of those savings on the roadside? I don't know what that shift would be. I was thinking of it more from the perspective of tipping points, where you have your innovators, your early adopters, and this curve. And if you can get 15% of the market share, you start getting more people coming over to whatever that idea is. So, you know, my rainbows and unicorns goal is, could we ever get to a 15% market share here where it would actually tip more people into transit? And as we do that tipping, it would take the pressure off of our roads. But it's a great question. I don't have a great answer to it at this point. It absolutely does reduce the pressure to some extent, but that's counterbalanced by the fact that if we do have the economic growth because of the investment in transit, and we do have the business growth because of the investment in transit, as we take people out of their cars and put them into transit, as more people come to the region, some portion of them will take transit and some portion of them will just fill in the gap of the riders who converted. So I'm not sure that there's a strong case for saying that we would reduce the costs for our road, but we might reduce the increase in costs to maintain our roads, if that helps.
That helped me, definitely. It's definitely a way I didn't think about that, so I love that answer. You also mentioned a lot about regional conversations within the GRTC, but are there reactions from regional partners or elected officials on support for going to zero fare?
Yeah, there are. I think, and the support is it's a wide range of support. I think there's some. I'm going to go back to that innovator, early adopters. You know, kind of. There's some who immediately jumped in and thought, yes, this is what we need. There's some who had a little bit more restraint. So, you know what, I like the idea. It sounds good, but I need some more information about the fiscal responsibility of it. Where's the money coming from? How sustainable is it? We don't want to go down this route and not. And others were like, well, really need to balance why we would go into zero fares. Why not put more into more transit, more frequency, more coverage? So that local partners had the whole spectrum of questions and needed a lot more information before they came to their own conclusions about which way we should go.
Yeah. So is the $10 million from the GA this year one-time funding for zero fare transit, or a commitment that can be made annually?
Oh, well, I guess that depends on the state economy. It's a state's budget, and that $10 million is intended for the entire state. I can't assume that GRTC would be able to go all up as much as I would love them. And whether or not it would be included in future years, that is a conversation for our Commonwealth Transportation Board and our state secretary, and as they do their budgets every year. I would hope that we would see success here and we would see a higher investment in transit, and that part of that investment would make it easier for transit agencies who have a model similar to ours to be able to make that transition. But I can't, at this point, there's no guarantee that it would be there for more than 1 year. Now, I believe it could be used for multiple years. So it wouldn't just be we get it this year and have to use it this year. I think we would smear it across a couple of years. It is, at this point, a 1-year investment.
Do you think this is something constituents can help with to make it a multi-year investment?
Well, always. I think that is always the hope, that as people learn more about transit, as people understand and decide that this is a value that they want to support for the community, that they need to reach out to their local leadership to express that value. Local leadership has a lot of demands on their time, their resources. Do they put money to education? Do they put money into mental health? Do they put money into affordable housing? There are a lot of demands in this region for our dollars. Transit is one of those demands. I think it ranks as high or higher because if you don't have mobility connections, you start to fail in your housing and your jobs and your education because people can't make those connections. So I obviously think that transit should rate very high, but the region has to decide that together, and your leadership needs to know what you feel should be ranked highly. And if you think transit is it, you should tell them. If you think it's something else, you should tell them, and then they can react to that.
Definitely. In that, are there other mid-sized cities that we can look at who have a no fare model, especially if people are looking for more information to feel more informed on booking their reps?
I have an extensive list. I don't have the full list, but I know that they're looking at it in LA. They're looking at Kansas City. Chapel Hill has a model of zero fare, and there's a lot of other small to mid-sized agencies that either have it or are looking at it. It is one where it's easier to make the transition when you have a smaller budget and a smaller reliance on the fare box, like we do. You saw the reliance on our fare box was pretty small, and we take the expenses out, it's even smaller. But when you get to some of the larger agencies, you get to Cleveland or DC or SEPTA, Philadelphia, or some of those others, their reliance on fare box is so high, the investment and the transition is a bigger lift. But some of the mid-sized and small sizes that don't rely on that commuter revenue and don't rely on the fare box from that range of income levels, it's a good conversation, and people are to really consider how it would work for them.
Yeah, and then so if we take away rider cards to keep track of data for the ridership, how do you plan to collect that information in the future if we are zero fare?
I love that question. So, okay, some of this absolutely I know, and some of this I just have some ideas around it. Very exciting. The first thing is that if we do it as a pilot, we know if you want to know how do we find out now, what's the income level of people using different fare types, using different modes. We do that through our onboard survey. We do it every 3 years. We just finished one pre-COVID, which is why that data was so on hand for us. If we go into zero fares, we would continue that kind of onboard survey to collect data to see how our ridership is shifting or changing as we move forward. Now that's easy, and it's not cheap, but it's not hugely expensive. I think I'm going to give a number that I'm going to be wrong on it. We actually did it at a fairly affordable cost. However, we have some new technology coming out, buses, some new mobile apps for being able to look at detours, being able to look for how many people are riding a bus, to look at when the bus is coming so you can see it real time. Some of those apps are going to allow us, people sign up to, if they're using it on the bus, to be able to help understand when people are coming off, they're getting off, they're moving, that connectivity. We might be able to supply also with the clever devices that will be on our buses. We're looking to do some advertising through there, and we're hoping that if we can create some reward programs where people might voluntarily sign up. If they're riding, their app shows they're riding, they get off, they go to the Urban Coffee and they get 10% off their coffee. We get this advertising revenue from the business, but we've also been able to track that rider. And while we're not tracking their personal data, it gives us their use data, and then we can translate that over and start collecting in other ways. We just have to look at it from a different angle. There are absolutely ways to get that information. The majority of our riders have mobile apps. We also know that. And so it's just a matter of leveraging that technology on our buses.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the next question is near and dear to my heart. Has the GRTC looked at climate benefits of growing ridership? And is there a greenhouse gas return on investment that could be made?
No. Let me rephrase that. No, we haven't. Yes, there is. How about that?
Yes.
We have had a conversion of our whole fleet. We've been doing this for over 10 years of converting our fleet from diesel to CNG. And CNG, compressed natural gas, has definitely an environmental impact. We're also going to look at a conversion from CNG over to electric, but I think we're looking at that as more of a 20 to 30 year plan. We want to make sure that when we do invest in that technology, it's right for this region. So there's some shifts there in what we're doing to make our own system more environmentally friendly and reduce our footprint. But then, of course, the more people that ride transit and the less people who are taking cars, there's that added benefit as well. So it's a dual hit. Both we have to look internally at how we can be more environmentally friendly, but also externally as we grow that ridership, we can take those off the road. I think ride finders, the VTA, Virginia Transit Association, and the Plan RVA, they all have metrics that show currently what our carbon emission reduction is because of the trips we have out there. I don't have those on hand, but I know that these out there, and as we increase ridership, those numbers will only increase.
Awesome. One last question. What is or are the best ways for RVA Rapid Transit to support your goals?
This is the one of the best ways to start educating people. I hate that word, it's a little condescending. To open the conversation, to open the dialogue, so that we can determine what our community values are, and make sure that, you know, GRTC and RVA Rapid Transit and our riders and our other communities and our local leaders, that we're all talking together and that we're moving forward in sync. And having these conversations, I believe, is critical. And then expanding them beyond, become advocates, influencers, leaders, thought leaders on the topic. Take some of these presentations, like them freely, and you know, do them yourself. You know, your neighbors, bring some of our folks out to do more of these talks. Because the more we're talking about it, the more it's on people's minds, the more they might see the interconnectedness of transit. How transit isn't just about driving buses. Transit is about prosperity and mobility. Transit's about the connectivity of our populations between their housing and their jobs and their quality of life. That these are concepts that we need to be looking at holistically and totally, and having been part of that conversation and open up these dialogues is really essential to making improvements on any of them. So thank you so much for having me, having these questions, and I hope that the conversation, the dialogue continues.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. This has been very insightful. I would also like to thank everyone for their great questions and discussion that led to. Okay, yeah. So, yes, thank you again, Julie. Just a reminder, we'll also be emailing folks Friday or early next week with a link to the recording, so you can share with others you might think may be interested in learning more about this topic. And we are going to transition now to hear from RVA Rapid Transit's new Director of Community Engagement, Faith Walker, about a new initiative we have just gotten underway called the Rider's Voice, which will be helpful on figuring out what the community is really looking for throughout public transportation.
Thank you, Kendra. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So thank you again, Kendra, and thank you again, Julie, for that great presentation, and everyone for being here today. My name is Faith Walker, and I am RVA Rapid Transit's new Director of Community Engagement. I came aboard in January of this year to help root RVA Rapid Transit's policy and advocacy work deeply in the community and perspectives of everyday riders. At its core, my work focuses on amplifying and supporting the stories, concerns, and interests of everyday bus riders in decision-making about public transportation throughout the region. I'm also engaging potential bus riders where lines do not currently exist. Now, we've just recently launched an initiative called the Rider's Voice, which is aimed at collecting and amplifying the stories, experiences, and concerns and interests of everyday bus riders for better transit in the Richmond region. Now, as always, the ultimate mission is to help make it easier to get around everyday life using public transit. And so very soon, as you can imagine, the beautiful weather, but also we'll be able to talk to people face to face. But as you can imagine, the pandemic has made that challenging. So to start, we created a hotline that folks can actually call. And we also have an online survey where folks can fill out. Now, the idea is that writers can both leave general comments about their experiences and stories, but also they can leave a comment on a specific topic that will periodically update. So for instance, right now, the topic we're asking folks is, how has free bus fare affected you? And so what I'd like to do right now is I wanted to play 2 audio clips for you of responses we've gotten so far. And we have permission from both of these writers to share their thoughts. This is from a senior who I believe is 80 years old on a fixed income. And the second is from someone recalling their experience as a student here. And then during a time of transition, moving back to Richmond and the kind of access Zero Fare has provided them. So we'll share that now.
Yes, my name is John Luck, and I frequently catch the Chamberlain Avenue bus and Jenner Park bus. I think the service is real good since the pandemic, specifically because it's no charge. Because most of the time I ride the bus, a lot of elderly people and handicapped people get on the bus, and they show real good service, and we all on a fixed income. Some more.
All right, and so now we're transition to the next voice, and that's from Anna.
Hi, my name is Anna Clemens. I ride the 5 and the 14 the most, and I also ride the Pulse pretty often. I really would like if we could keep Zero Fare in the city. I had the luxury, I guess you could say, of having Zero Fare when I lived in Atlanta for a little bit and was working for MARTA. And then again, as a VCU student here in Richmond, with their transit pass. I will say that prior to moving to Atlanta and after coming back from Atlanta, I didn't have a free transit pass in Richmond and was just paying out of pocket. At the time, I was a student. I wasn't making a lot of money. My budget was really tight. And, I would make decisions about going places and seeing friends, or even, experiencing the city or accessing opportunities based on the bus fare and if I had money for it in my budget that week, or, if I could walk that mile and save money. And I think it meant that I really lost out on a lot of opportunities. I didn't get to see my friends as much. I didn't get to explore the city. And it was, something that I just kind of had to live with. And then I went and lived in Atlanta and was able to explore and access and do everything I could have ever wanted for free. I didn't have this price tag associated with the bus, and it was really eye-opening and just really freeing to have that level of access. And then I had to come back to Richmond, and VCU didn't have the contract yet with GRTC, so I was back to, paying for the bus, not using the bus, trying to walk, further and further distances. And it definitely impacted, the kinds of jobs that I was able to apply to, the kind of opportunities I was able to take advantage of. I would sometimes not go to networking opportunities because they were just too far. And then when VCU and GRTC came up with their partnership, it was like I was, back to having this freedom and this access that I didn't previously have. And it's just been, I think, such a blessing to have that. And I can definitely understand for fellow Richmonders, having Zero Fare is a lifeline to the city. It is that access, and I don't think that we should take it away because, by having this, Zero Fare, we are truly giving the neediest Richmonders, the most vulnerable Richmonders, we're giving them, in some ways a key to the city. They get to, access and they get to be part of the city and they get to, be told that they're meaningful and that we want them to be involved.
All right, thank you so much for that comment, Anna. So now I just want to share just 2 feedbacks from our online survey. And let me get my screen a little larger. As COVID-19 has been a health issue, I feel more comfortable and confident taking the bus now with no contact and distance from passengers and drivers for everyone's safety. From Chris, He says it removes the hassle of the app. It also speeds up the boarding, which seems to keep the bus running on time. And so Julie mentioned some of those highlights in her presentation as well. So thank you for that feedback. So now I want to transition and just share with you also a video clip that we have of some interviews that took place back in 2019, which were really the roots of the Writer's Voice program. This young woman lived along the Route 1 Chesterfield, which is now Richmond Highway. While this is a video, it gives you a feel of the outreach that we'll be doing later on this spring and this summer.
I'm excited because I can get like better job opportunities and just go out and do things. Well, one thing I'm going to be excited about is I can use the bus to get my nails done, like get my hair done and things, and like go out and like have fun.
What are some things that you don't have access to now?
Better job opportunities and just like going out to do like hobbies and things like that. I would go like downtown Richmond and like see things because I'm not really from here, so I can go out and like see the area and see where things are and get used to the area.
Okay, so we're about time to wrap up, but I want to thank you all for joining us today. And I also want to strongly encourage you that if you are a regular bus rider, to give the hotline a call. It's 804-286-0007. Share that feedback. You can also fill out our online survey that's on our website. And then we'll be placing some of those in our chat box. So we'll put the link there. Or if you know a regular rider or someone who is an essential worker or part of those communities that Julie mentioned, we would love for them to share their stories centered around zero fare, but any topic that comes up. I also know that folks can even reach out to me directly if they feel more comfortable. My email is faith@rvarapidtransit.org. And also, you can also see more info on our website. All right, and we're going to post a link there. All right, thank you so much again. And Kendra, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Faith. And I just want to give a quick note that we will be having, or the next two transit talks are scheduled. April 22nd, we will be talking about regional transit and how to reach the greater RVA transit vision plan. And then on May 20th, we'll be talking about transit governance for the region. And we will definitely send more info on these as we get into the spring. Reminder, you can sign up for our email list. That's the best way to get a reminder on all of these. And thank you all again for being here today. And big thanks to Julie Timm for the great presentation and discussion of the costs, benefits, and possibilities of zero fare locally. We will email you all when we have the recording of today's event up on our YouTube channel so folks can carry on discussion, share with your friends and family about this key issue for our region. And I hope everyone has a good rest of this very warm day that we have. Thank you so much.